What if the person everyone had ignored turned out to be the most important member of the family? Isabella Sterling grew up in a mansion filled with wealth, luxury, and success. But after losing her mother, everything changed. Her father became distant, her stepmother favored her own daughter, and slowly Isabella became invisible in her own home. Her birthdays were forgotten, her achievements were ignored, and nobody seemed to notice the quiet girl standing right in front of them. Then one rainy afternoon, Isabella discovered a hidden box beneath the floorboards of her late mother's room. Inside was a mysterious letter, a letter that revealed a family secret buried for decades, a secret inheritance, a forgotten valley worth millions, and a journey that would expose shocking betrayals, hidden truths, and a legacy powerful enough to change thousands of lives. But as Isabella uncovers the truth, powerful people will do everything they can to stop her. Will the forgotten daughter finally find her place in the world? And can one overlooked girl turn a hidden inheritance into a legacy that changes generations? Stay until the end of this emotional and inspiring story about family, courage, forgiveness, and discovering the true life. Because sometimes the people nobody notices become the ones nobody can ever forget. Chapter 1. The girl no one noticed. The forgotten daughter. The city of Westbridge Heights was famous for its beauty, wealth, and success. Towering glass buildings reflected the sunlight during the day. Elegant restaurants lined the streets. Luxury cars moved through the city like silent symbols of power and status. People came from all over the country, hoping to build successful careers and prosperous lives. Among the most respected names in Westbridge Heights was Alexander Sterling. He was the founder of Sterling Global Enterprises, a business empire worth hundreds of millions of dollars. His face appeared in magazines. His speeches were featured on television. Business leaders admired him, and young entrepreneurs dreamed of becoming like him. To the outside world, Alexander Sterling had everything: success, wealth, influence, a beautiful home, a perfect family. At least, that was what everyone believed. No one knew the truth. No one knew about the quiet sadness hidden behind the walls of the Sterling mansion. And no one knew about the daughter who felt invisible inside it. Her name was Isabella Sterling. A childhood filled with love. Years earlier, Isabella's life had been very different. When she was young, the Sterling mansion felt warm and alive. Her mother, Grace Sterling, filled every room with kindness. Grace wasn't impressed by wealth. She wasn't interested in social status. While Alexander focused on building his company, Grace focused on building a family. Every morning she walked Isabella to school. Every evening she read bedtime stories. Every weekend they explored parks, visited museums, or baked cookies together in the large family kitchen. Grace made even ordinary moments feel special. She remembered every birthday, every achievement, every dream. To Isabella, her mother wasn't just a parent. She was her best friend. And for many years, life felt safe, happy, complete. Then everything changed. The day that changed everything. Isabella was only 9 years old when her mother became seriously ill. At first, nobody seemed worried. Doctors assured the family that treatment would help. Alexander remained optimistic. Grace continued smiling. Everyone believed things would return to normal, but they didn't. Weeks became months. Months became years. The illness grew worse. Hospital visits became more frequent. Family outings became rare. The laughter that once filled the mansion slowly disappeared. Young Isabella spent countless afternoons sitting beside her mother's hospital bed. She would read stories aloud, talk about school, describe funny things that happened during the day. Anything to make her mother smile. Grace always smiled, even on her worst days, even when she was exhausted, even when she knew time was running out. One evening, as sunlight faded beyond the hospital window, Grace held Isabella's hand tightly. "You are stronger than you know." Isabella frowned. "Why do you always say that?" Grace smiled softly. "Because one day you'll need to remember it." At 9 years old, Isabella didn't understand. She wished she had. Goodbye. 6 months later, Grace Sterling passed away. The news shattered the family. For Isabella, it felt as though someone had taken all the light from the world. The funeral was attended by hundreds of people. Business leaders, politicians, friends, relatives, everyone came to honor Grace. Everyone spoke about her kindness, her generosity, her warmth, but none of those words made Isabella feel better. because no matter how many people praised her mother, she was still gone. And for the first time in her life, Isabella felt completely alone. Her father lost in grief. Alexander Sterling loved his daughter. That was never the problem. The problem was grief. After losing Grace, something inside him changed. The energetic businessman who once laughed easily became distant, quiet, obsessed with work. His office became his refuge. His company became his escape. Instead of processing his pain, he buried himself in meetings, projects, and business expansions. At first, Isabella understood. They were both hurting. But weeks became months, and months became years. The distance between them continued growing. Alexander was physically present, but emotionally absent. He missed school performances, forgot parent meetings, cancelled weekend plans, and gradually, father and daughter stopped talking about anything meaningful. Neither intended for it to happen, yet it happened anyway. The arrival of a new family. 3 years after Grace's death, Alexander made an announcement. He had met someone. Her name was Vanessa Cole. She was elegant, confident, and highly respected within the city's social circles. Vanessa also had a daughter named Sophia. Sophia was 1 year younger than Isabella. At first, Isabella tried to be supportive. She wanted her father to be happy, and perhaps deep down she hoped a larger family might ease the loneliness she felt. For a short time, things seemed promising. Vanessa appeared kind. Sophia seemed friendly. The future looked hopeful, but appearances can be deceiving. The shift. The changes began slowly, almost invisibly. At first, nobody noticed, not even Isabella. Sophia quickly became the center of attention. She was outgoing, charming, confident. She loved being admired, and people loved admiring her. Guests praised her constantly. Vanessa encouraged it. Alexander, eager to create harmony within the new family, often focused extra attention on Sophia as well. Isabella told herself it didn't matter. She wasn't jealous. She didn't need constant attention. At least, that's what she tried to believe. But little moments began adding up. Sophia received expensive gifts. Isabella received practical items. Sophia's achievements were celebrated. Isabella's accomplishments often went unnoticed. Sophia's opinions mattered. Isabella's thoughts were rarely requested. Individually, these moments seemed small. Together, they became painful, invisible. By the age of 16, Isabella had become an expert at being overlooked. She earned excellent grades. Nobody noticed. She won a regional writing competition. Nobody attended the ceremony. She volunteered at local charities. Few people cared. Meanwhile, Sophia's every activity became family news. A dance recital, a social event, a minor achievement. Everything received attention. Everything received praise. One evening, Isabella sat quietly during dinner while her father congratulated Sophia on winning a small fashion competition. For nearly 30 minutes, everyone discussed the event, the excitement, the photographs, the opportunities. Eventually, Alexander smiled. "We're very proud of you." Sophia beamed. Vanessa applauded. The conversation continued. No one remembered that Isabella had received acceptance into an advanced academic program earlier that day. Not even her father. She never mentioned it. What was the point? The forgotten birthday. The moment that hurt most happened shortly before Isabella's 17th birthday. She didn't expect a large celebration. She wasn't interested in expensive gifts. All she wanted was a quiet dinner with her family, a chance to feel remembered, important, loved. For weeks, she looked forward to it. Then the day arrived, and nothing happened. No decorations, no cake, no family dinner, no birthday wishes. Everyone seemed occupied with preparations for one of Sophia's upcoming events. At first, Isabella assumed they were planning a surprise. Hours passed, then the entire day. Eventually, evening arrived. Still nothing. Not a single person mentioned her birthday. Not even her father. That night, Isabella sat alone in her room, staring at the calendar. Tears rolled silently down her cheeks. Not because of presents, not because of celebrations. Because she realized something painful. People can feel lonely even when surrounded by others. And sometimes the deepest loneliness comes from feeling forgotten by the people you love most. A different kind of strength. Over time, Isabella stopped seeking attention. Instead, she focused on herself. Books became her escape. Learning became her comfort. Writing became her refuge. She spent hours in the mansion's library reading novels, biographies, and historical accounts. Within those pages, she discovered something important. Many remarkable people had experienced rejection. Yet those experiences often became sources of strength. The realization helped, not completely, but enough. While others underestimated her, Isabella quietly developed qualities that would later define her life. Patience, compassion, resilience, wisdom. She didn't realize it, but hardship was shaping her, preparing her, strengthening her. Her mother's room. There was one place in the mansion where Isabella still felt connected to happier times. Her mother's old room. After Grace's death, most of her belongings remained untouched. Few family members ever entered. The room felt almost frozen in time. Photographs still decorated the shelves. Books remained exactly where Grace left them. Even the scent seemed familiar. Whenever Isabella felt overwhelmed, she visited the room. It reminded her that she had once been deeply loved, unconditional, complete. One rainy Saturday afternoon, after another disappointing family gathering where she spent hours unnoticed, Isabella retreated there once again. Thunder echoed outside. Rain tapped gently against the windows. The mansion felt unusually quiet. She sat on the floor beside an old wooden dresser and began sorting through boxes of family photographs. Hours passed. Then, something unusual caught her attention. A loose floorboard near the corner of the room. She frowned. She had visited this room hundreds of times, yet she had never noticed it. Curious, she knelt beside it. The board shifted slightly when touched. Her heartbeat quickened. Slowly, she lifted it. Beneath the floorboard lay a small wooden box covered in dust, hidden, forgotten, waiting. The discovery. With trembling hands, Isabella removed the box. It wasn't large, perhaps the size of a book. Its surface showed signs of age. The brass latch had begun tarnishing, yet the box remained intact. Carefully, she opened it. Inside were several items, old photographs, a silver key, and a sealed envelope. The envelope immediately captured her attention, because written across the front in her mother's unmistakable handwriting were 4 words, for Isabella. Only her breath caught. The room suddenly felt very still, very quiet, almost as though time itself had paused. She stared at the envelope, unable to move, unable to think. Questions flooded her mind. Why had her mother hidden this? When had she written it? What secrets could possibly remain after all these years? Slowly, Isabella reached for the letter. Her hands trembled, her heart raced, and deep inside she sensed something extraordinary, something life-changing, something that might finally explain mysteries she never knew existed. As thunder rumbled beyond the windows, Isabella carefully broke the seal, unaware that the words waiting inside would change her future forever, and perhaps reveal why she had never truly been forgotten at all. End of Chapter 1. Chapter 2. The Secret Letter. Isabella opens her mother's hidden letter and discovers a shocking family secret, a lost inheritance, and a journey that will transform her life. Chapter 2. The Secret Letter. The Forgotten Daughter. The rain continued falling outside the mansion. Thunder rolled across the dark afternoon sky, but Isabella Sterling barely noticed. She sat on the floor of her late mother's room, staring at the envelope in her hands. For Isabella only, the words seemed almost unreal. For years she had searched for signs of her mother's presence. A forgotten note, an old recording, a hidden message, anything. Now, after all this time, she finally had something. A letter written specifically for her. A letter her mother had wanted her to find. Her heart pounded. Slowly, carefully, she unfolded the paper inside. The handwriting was unmistakable, elegant, gentle, familiar. For a moment, tears filled her eyes. It felt as though her mother was sitting beside her once again. Then she began to read. Her mother's final words. My dearest Isabella, if you are reading this, then I am no longer with you. First, I want you to know something very important. You have always been loved, more than words can ever express. There may come a time when you feel alone. There may come a time when you believe people have forgotten. But never forget this truth. Your worth is not determined by the attention you receive from others. You are valuable simply because you are you. Isabella paused. A tear rolled down her cheek. Those words felt strangely timely, almost as though her mother somehow knew exactly what she would need years later. She took a deep breath and continued reading. The Family Secret. The next section of the letter immediately changed everything. There is something I have never told anyone except my father. Isabella frowned. Her grandfather had died years before she was born. She knew very little about him. The letter continued. Our family possesses a secret that has been hidden for generations. It concerns a property known as Ashwood Valley. Isabella blinked. Ashwood Valley? She had never heard the name before. Your grandfather purchased the valley many years ago. Most people believed it was worthless land, but he saw something others did not. Curiosity replaced her sadness. She read faster. Before his death, he placed ownership of the property in a trust intended for his future grandchildren. The legal documents proving ownership were hidden to protect them from people who might try to claim the land. Isabella's heart began racing. The words seemed impossible. A hidden property? Secret ownership? A trust? This sounded more like one of the adventure novels she loved reading than real life. Yet her mother's handwriting was real. The letter was real. Everything felt real. The map inside the envelope. Isabella discovered another folded sheet. A map, old and yellowed with age. Several locations were marked in red. One area near the edge contained handwritten instructions. Begin at Willowbrook Ridge. Willowbrook Ridge. The name meant nothing to her. She studied the map carefully. The location appeared hundreds of miles from Westbridge Heights, deep in the countryside, far from everything she knew. The map also included a short note. The truth begins here. A chill ran through her. A warning. The final section of the letter carried a very different tone. The handwriting seemed more urgent, more serious. Isabella, there are people who may try to prevent you from uncovering the truth. Some will dismiss you. Others may deceive you. Trust your instincts, trust your heart, and remember that true character is revealed during difficult moments. The next sentence made her pause completely. The greatest inheritance is not wealth. It is the courage to become who you were meant to be. Isabella read those words twice, then 3 times. Something about them felt important, like a lesson hidden inside a larger mystery. The silver key. After finishing the letter, Isabella returned her attention to the contents of the wooden box. The photographs showed places she didn't recognize. Old houses, fields, a lake. Several pictures included a younger version of her mother standing beside an elderly man, her grandfather. Then there was the silver key, small, elegant, clearly old. Attached to it was a tiny tag. Written on the tag were 3 simple words. Willowbrook Station, Locker 17, Isabella Sterling. Whatever secret her mother had hidden, it was larger than she originally imagined. Sleepless thoughts. That evening, Isabella joined her family for dinner. Or rather, she sat at the table while everyone else discussed their own lives. Sophia talked about an upcoming fashion event. Vanessa described plans for a charity gala. Alexander spent most of the meal responding to business messages. Nobody noticed Isabella's silence. Nobody asked about her day. For once, she didn't mind, because her thoughts were somewhere else entirely. Ashwood Valley, Willowbrook Ridge, Locker 17, a hidden inheritance. The mystery consumed her attention. By the time dinner ended, she had already made a decision. She was going to investigate. No matter what, research. The following morning, Isabella skipped her usual routine and headed directly to the city library. If Ashwood Valley existed, there had to be records. Maps, articles, something. Hours passed. Most searches produced nothing. Then finally she found a reference buried within an old regional archive. The article was over 40 years old. The headline read, "Investor purchases large tract of land near Willowbrook Ridge." The investor's name? Edward Harrington. Her grandfather. Isabella's pulse quickened. She continued reading. According to the article, Edward had purchased thousands of acres of rural land. Many local residents believed he had wasted his money. The property appeared isolated and undeveloped. The article ended. No further details. No explanation. Yet one thing was now certain. Her mother's story was true. An unexpected conversation. Later that afternoon, Isabella returned home. As she entered the library, she overheard voices. Vanessa and Alexander were speaking. Normally she would have walked away. This time something made her stop. Vanessa sounded irritated. "I still don't understand why Grace kept so many things hidden." Alexander sighed. "Because that's how she was." Vanessa lowered her voice. "Are you sure there aren't other family assets we don't know about?" Isabella froze. Assets? Family assets? The timing felt strange. Very strange. Had Vanessa discovered something? Or was it merely coincidence? The uncertainty bothered her. She quietly left before being noticed. But for the first time, she sensed that the secret preparing to leave. Over the next several days, Isabella planned carefully. She gathered information, studied maps, researched Willowbrook Ridge. The small town appeared remote, peaceful, old-fashioned, a world away from Westbridge Heights. Eventually, she purchased a train ticket. The journey would take nearly 6 hours. Long enough to think, long enough to doubt herself, long enough to turn back. Yet she never considered killing herself. For the first time in years, she felt excited, purposeful, alive. The mystery gave her something she had been missing. Direction. A final discovery. The night before her departure, Isabella returned to her mother's room one last time. She wanted to ensure she hadn't overlooked anything. For nearly an hour, she searched through drawers, shelves, and storage boxes. Most contained ordinary belongings. Then she noticed something hidden inside an old book, a photograph. The image showed her mother standing beside a weathered farmhouse. On the back, written in faded ink, were 4 words: "Everything begins here." The same phrase appeared on the map. The farmhouse clearly mattered. Somehow, it connected to the mystery. And now Isabella had another clue. The beginning of the journey. The next morning arrived cold and clear. Sunlight streamed across the city. People rushed through their routines. Cars filled the streets. Business meetings began. Life continued as normal. Yet for Isabella, everything was changing. She packed a small suitcase, placed the map, letter, photograph, and silver key inside, then quietly left the mansion. No one stopped her. No one asked where she was going. The realization hurt slightly, but it also strengthened her resolve. This journey belonged to her, and perhaps that was how it was meant to be. As the train pulled away from the station, Isabella watched Westbridge Heights disappear behind her. She felt nervous, excited, hopeful. And for the first time in years, she no longer felt invisible, because somewhere ahead lay answers. Answers about her family, her mother, her grandfather, and perhaps even herself. What she didn't know was that someone else had already begun asking questions. Someone ambitious, someone determined, someone who would do almost anything to uncover the inheritance before she did. And that person was much closer than she realized. End of chapter 2. Chapter 3. The journey begins. Isabella arrives in Willowbrook Ridge, unlocks the mysterious station locker, and discovers evidence that the hidden inheritance may be worth far more than anyone imagined. Chapter 3. The journey begins. The train sped across the countryside, carrying Isabella Sterling farther from Westbridge Heights than she had ever travelled alone. For hours she sat beside the window, watching the landscape change. The towering skyscrapers disappeared first, then crowded suburbs, then endless stretches of farmland. Golden fields rolled across the horizon. Small villages appeared and vanished. Rivers sparkled beneath the afternoon sun. Everything felt quieter here, slower, simpler, and somehow Isabella found the change comforting. For years she had lived surrounded by luxury, yet luxury had never made her happy. Now travelling toward an uncertain future with nothing but a suitcase and a collection of clues, she felt more alive than she had in years. Arrival in Willowbrook Ridge. As evening approached, the train finally slowed. The conductor announced the next stop, Willowbrook Ridge. Isabella's heart immediately began racing. She gathered her belongings and stepped onto the platform. The station was small, very small. Nothing like the modern transportation hubs of Westbridge Heights. A few benches stood beneath a wooden shelter. Flower baskets decorated the entrance. An old clock hung above the station building. The entire town seemed frozen in time, yet there was something charming about it, something peaceful. For a moment, Isabella simply stood there, taking it all in. This was the place her mother had written about, the place where the mystery truly began. Locker 17. The station itself contained only a handful of storage lockers. Most appeared unused. Their paint had faded long ago. Dust covered many of the doors, but one immediately caught Isabella's attention. Locker 17. Her pulse quickened. Slowly, she reached into her pocket and removed the silver key. The key fit perfectly. For a second she hesitated. This moment felt important, like opening a door between her old life and something entirely new. Then she turned the key. Click. The lock opened. Carefully, Isabella pulled the door open. Inside rested a small leather briefcase. Nothing more. No treasure. No dramatic revelation. Just a worn brown briefcase covered in dust. Still, her instincts told her it mattered, very much. She lifted it carefully and carried it to a nearby bench. The latches opened with surprising ease. Inside were documents, maps, letters, and one sealed envelope marked with her grandfather's name, Edward Harrington. A message from the past. Isabella immediately opened the envelope. The paper inside had yellowed with age, yet the handwriting remained clear. If you are reading this, then the documents have survived. Her grandfather's words seemed strangely direct. The land known as Ashwood Valley is more valuable than most people realize, but its true value is not financial. The future of many people may one day depend upon what happens there. Isabella frowned. What did that mean? The future of many people? She continued reading. Trust Mr. Walter Finch. He knows the truth. You will find him in Willowbrook Ridge. The letter ended there. No explanation, no details, only another clue, another mystery, and another name. The stranger at the cafe night had begun falling by the time Isabella left the station. She checked into a small family-owned inn near the town square. The building was old but welcoming. Fresh flowers decorated the reception desk. The owner greeted her warmly. Everything about Willowbrook Ridge felt refreshingly genuine. After settling into her room, Isabella walked to a nearby cafe. She needed food and time to think. The cafe was quiet. Only a few customers occupied scattered tables. She ordered tea and began reviewing the documents in the briefcase. Maps covered with handwritten notes, property surveys, old photographs. Most appeared decades old, yet they all pointed toward the same location, Ashwood Valley. As she studied the papers, she became aware of someone watching her. A man sat alone near the window, perhaps 60 years old. Grey hair, sharp eyes, simple clothing, nothing remarkable. Yet he seemed unusually interested in her documents. Eventually he approached. "Excuse me." Isabella looked up cautiously. The man smiled politely. "You're not from around here?" "No." He nodded toward the papers. "And you're looking into Ashwood Valley?" The statement caught her off guard. "How do you know that?" The man smiled. "Because very few people still talk about it." A brief silence followed. Then his expression changed. "You should be careful." The warning felt unexpected. "Why?" The man hesitated, then simply said, "Not everyone wants old secrets uncovered." Before Isabella could ask another question, he paid for his coffee and left, leaving her with more questions than answers. Walter Finch. The next morning, Isabella began searching for Walter Finch. According to several townspeople, he lived on the outskirts of Willowbrook Ridge, near an old apple orchard. The house was easy to find, a modest cottage surrounded by trees. The property looked peaceful, well cared for, timeless. Isabella knocked on the door. Several moments passed. Then an elderly man appeared. His white hair reflected the morning sunlight. His eyes were sharp despite his age. The moment he saw Isabella, his expression changed, almost as though he recognized her. "Your Grace's daughter." It wasn't a question, it was a statement. Isabella stared. "You knew my mother?" Walter Finch smiled softly. "I knew your entire family." Suddenly, everything felt familiar. The hidden history inside the cottage, Walter prepared tea while Isabella explained everything. The letter, the map, the briefcase, the station locker. When she finished, the old man nodded. "Edward always believed this day would come." "My grandfather?" Walter smiled. "He was one of the smartest men I ever met." The old man then revealed a story Isabella had never heard. Decades earlier, Edward Harrington had purchased Ashwood Valley after discovering evidence of something remarkable. Natural mineral springs, rich farmland, and development potential far beyond what anyone imagined. Most investors dismissed the area. Edward saw opportunity, but he also saw something more important: community. According to Walter, Edward dreamed of creating schools, housing, and businesses that would help future generations thrive. He never viewed the valley as a way to become richer. He viewed it as a chance to build something meaningful. The story sounded familiar. It reminded Isabella of her mother, and strangely, it reminded her of herself. A problem emerges. Then Walter's expression grew serious. "There is a complication." Isabella immediately felt uneasy. "What kind of complication?" The old man sighed. "The original ownership records are missing." The words hit her like cold water. "Missing?" Walter nodded. The documents proving legal ownership disappeared years ago. For several seconds, Isabella sat speechless. The inheritance, the land, the trust, everything depended on those records. Without them, proving ownership might be impossible. "Can they be found?" Perhaps. The answer wasn't comforting. The farmhouse. Walter led Isabella to another room. There, hanging on the wall, was an old photograph. The image instantly captured her attention. It was the same farmhouse she had seen in her mother's photograph. Everything begins here. Her pulse quickened. Where is this? Walter smiled. That's the Harrington farmhouse. My grandfather's? Yes. The old man pointed toward the image. If the record still exists, that's where I'd start looking. The room suddenly felt very quiet. The farmhouse, the photograph, the hidden message. All the clues pointed toward the same place. An unwanted discovery. Later that afternoon, Isabella returned to the inn. As she approached the building, she noticed something strange. The door to her room was slightly open. She froze, certain she had locked it. Slowly she entered. Nothing appeared stolen, nothing appeared damaged, yet something felt wrong. She checked her belongings immediately. The briefcase remained untouched. The documents were still there. Everything seemed normal. Then she noticed a drawer left partially open. Someone had searched the room, carefully, quickly, professionally. A chill ran down her spine. The stranger from the cafe's warning echoed in her mind. Not everyone wants old secrets uncovered. Perhaps he would. Trouble back home. Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away in Westbridge Heights, another discovery was unfolding. Vanessa Cole had entered Grace Sterling's old room for the first time in years. Initially, she had been searching for family records. Nothing. Then she noticed the loose floorboard, the empty hiding place beneath it. And suddenly, she realized something important. Something had been hidden there, something valuable. And Isabella had taken it. Vanessa's eyes narrowed. Curiosity quickly transformed into determination. Whatever secret Grace had hidden, she intended to uncover it. Tacked toward Ashwood Valley the next morning, Isabella stood on a hill overlooking the countryside. In the distance, she could see rolling forests stretching toward the horizon. Beyond them lay Ashwood Valley, the land her grandfather protected, the land her mother wanted her to find, the land connected to a mystery decades in the making. Somewhere within that valley, answers awaited, and perhaps danger as well. Because it was now clear that she wasn't the only person interested in the inheritance. Someone was watching, someone was searching, and someone wanted the truth to remain hidden. But Isabella had come too far to stop now. For the first time in her life, she felt as though she was chasing something new, something worth fighting for. Whatever waited in Ashwood Valley, she intended to find, no matter what stood in her way. End of Chapter 3. Chapter 4, Betrayal and Discovery. Isabella explores the abandoned Harrington farmhouse, uncovers a shocking betrayal, and discovers evidence that someone close to her family has been hiding the truth for years. Chapter 4, Betrayal and Discovery. The Forgotten Daughter. The morning sky above Willowbrook Ridge was painted with soft shades of gold and blue. A cool breeze moved across the countryside as Isabella Sterling stood outside the inn, staring toward the distant hills. Somewhere beyond those hills lay Ashwood Valley, and somewhere within Ashwood Valley lay the answers she had been searching for. For the first time in years, she felt a sense of purpose. Not because of wealth, not because of inheritance, but because this journey was helping her discover who she truly was. The forgotten daughter was finally writing her own story, yet she had no idea how difficult the next chapter would become. The road to the farmhouse. Walter Finch agreed to accompany her. The old man drove a weathered pickup truck that seemed almost as old as the roads themselves. As they traveled through winding country lanes, he shared stories about her grandfather, stories no one had ever told her before. Edward Harrington had been respected throughout the region, not because he was wealthy, because he genuinely cared about people. When local farmers struggled during droughts, he helped them. When schools needed supplies, he donated quietly. When families faced hardship, he often appeared with solutions before anyone asked. He believed wealth should create opportunities for themselves, not for power. The words reminded Isabella of her mother, and somehow hearing them made her feel closer to both. First sight of Ashwood Valley. After nearly an hour, they reached a hill overlooking the valley. The view took Isabella's breath away. Below stretched thousands of acres of forests, rivers, open meadows, and rolling farmland. Sunlight reflected off a beautiful lake near the center. Wildflowers covered portions of the landscape. The valley looked untouched, peaceful, almost magical. For a moment, Isabella forgot about the inheritance entirely. She simply admired its beauty. Then Walter pointed toward the eastern side. There, in the distance, stood an old farmhouse, weathered by time, but still standing. The same farmhouse from the photograph, the same farmhouse her mother had marked. Everything begins here. The abandoned house. The farmhouse sat alone among ancient oak trees. Its white paint had faded long ago. Several windows were blank. The wooden porch sagged slightly under its own weight. Yet despite its age, the structure remained surprisingly strong. As Isabella approached, an odd feeling settled over her, almost as if the house had been waiting for someone to return, waiting for her. The front door opened with a loud creak. Dust floated through beams of sunlight. Old furniture remained scattered throughout the rooms. Photographs still hung on several walls. Books rested on shelves. It felt less like an abandoned building and more like a frozen moment in time. Walter smiled softly. Your grandfather loved this place. Isabella nodded. She could feel it. Clues hidden everywhere. For hours they searched the farmhouse. Drawers, cabinets, shelves, storage trunks, anything that might contain ownership records. Most discoveries were ordinary. Old receipts, letters, family photographs, farm records. Nothing proving ownership of Ashwood Valley. By afternoon, frustration began creeping in. Perhaps the documents truly were gone. Perhaps someone had destroyed them years ago. Perhaps the inheritance was impossible to claim. Then Isabella noticed something unusual. A large bookshelf positioned against one wall seemed slightly out of place. Its base showed signs of movement, as though it had been shifted many times. Curious, she pushed gently. To her surprise, the bookshelf moved, revealing a narrow hidden door behind it. Walter stared in shock. I never knew that was there. Neither. The secret room. The hidden room was small, no larger than a walk-in closet. Dust covered everything. Clearly, nobody had entered for many years. A wooden desk stood in one corner. Several storage boxes lined the walls, and resting atop the desk sat a little safe. For several seconds, neither spoke. The safe immediately became the center of their attention. Could it contain the missing records? The answer seemed obvious. The problem was only the lock required a key. Walter frowned. Do you have any idea where the key might be? Before Isabella could answer, a realization struck her. The silver key. Not the station locker key. The second key she had discovered hidden beneath the false bottom of the briefcase the night before. She had almost forgotten about it. Quickly, she removed it from her pocket. The key slid into the lock perfectly. Click. The safe opened. The truth revealed inside were dozens of documents. Legal papers, property deeds, contracts, maps, everything had been carefully organized. Walter immediately began examining them. Within minutes, his eyes widened. They're real. Isabella's pulse quickened. What does that mean? The old man looked at her. It means your grandfather owned Ashwood Valley. He held up a document. The original ownership records. Another document. The trust agreement. Then another. The transfer instructions. The evidence was overwhelming. The inheritance was legitimate. The property belonged to the Harrington family. And according to the trust documents, Isabella was the rightful heir. For a moment, she simply stared. Years of feeling forgotten, ignored, invisible. And now she was holding proof that her mother had believed in her all along. The shocking journey. But the biggest surprise wasn't inside the safe. At the very bottom rested several leather-bound journals. Edward Harrington's personal diaries. Walter carefully handed one to Isabella. You should read these. She opened the first journal. What she discovered changed everything. The entries revealed her grandfather's true vision for Ashwood Valley. He never intended to sell the land, never intended to develop luxury resorts or expensive housing. Instead, he dreamed of creating something extraordinary. Schools, libraries, affordable housing, scholarship programs, community centers, businesses that would provide jobs, opportunities for future generations. The valley wasn't simply an inheritance. It was a responsibility, a mission, a legacy. Then Isabella discovered another journal. This one contained more recent entries, and what she read left her stunned. Years earlier, someone had attempted to gain access to the ownership records. Someone Edward no longer trusted. Several names appeared throughout the entries. Most meant nothing, until one name appeared repeatedly. Marcus Cole. Isabella froze. Marcus Cole was Vanessa's brother, her stepmother's brother. The journals described business meetings, questions about the property, attempts to acquire ownership information. Then came the final entry. Marcus cannot be trusted. If anything happens, the records must remain hidden until the rightful heir is ready. A chill ran through Isabella. Suddenly everything made sense. The interest in family assets, the suspicious questions, the search of her hotel room, the timing. Someone in Vanessa's family had known about Ashwood Valley for years, and they wanted it. An unexpected visitor. Before Isabella could process everything, a sound echoed outside. A car entered. Walter immediately moved toward the window. His expression darkened. We have company. Two black vehicles were approaching the farmhouse. Slowly, deliberately. Isabella's heart began pounding. Several people stepped out. Among them stood a man wearing an expensive suit. Even from a distance, he looked confident, determined, dangerous. Walter's face turned pale. I know him. Who is he? The old man swallowed hard. Mark confrontation. Minutes later, Marcus entered the farmhouse. His smile appeared friendly, but his eyes told a different story. Cold, calculating, ambitious. He looked directly at Isabella. So, he smiled, you found the records. The statement wasn't a question. He already knew. Isabella remained silent. Marcus slowly approached. You don't understand what you're dealing with. Walter stepped forward, pleading. Marcus laughed. That's not going to happen. Then he looked back at Isabella. For years I've invested time and resources searching for Ashwood Valley. His smile faded, and now you're standing in the way. The room felt tense, dangerously tense. Yet Isabella surprised herself. Instead of fear, she felt determination. Years of being overlooked had taught her something valuable. Strength often develops in silence, and she was stronger than Marcus realized. Standing her ground, for the first time in her life, Isabella refused to back down. This property belongs to my family. Marcus narrowed his eyes. Legally, perhaps. It belongs to the people my grandfather wanted to help. The businessman laughed. That's a very idealistic view. Maybe. She met his gaze, but it's the right one. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Marcus shook his head. You have no idea what you're doing. He turned and walked toward the door. Before leaving, he paused. This isn't over. Then he disappeared, leaving behind a silence that felt almost heavier than the confrontation itself. A new understanding that evening. Isabella sat alone on the farmhouse porch. The sun slowly disappeared behind the hills. Ashwood Valley glowed beneath golden light. Beautiful, peaceful, full of possibility. For years, she had believed her greatest challenge was being forgotten. Now she understood something different. Being overlooked had prepared her for this moment. It had taught her patience, resilience, compassion, the very qualities needed to protect her grandfather's legacy, and she intended to protect it. No matter what happened next. Because this journey was no longer about inheritance, it was about purpose, and purpose was worth fighting for. What Isabella didn't know was that Marcus Cole was already planning his next move, a move that would force her to make the most important decision of her life. End of Chapter 5. The Forgotten Truth. Isabella uncovers the full story behind her grandfather's dream and discovers that Ashwood Valley's greatest treasure has nothing to do with. Chapter 5. The Forgotten Truth. The Forgotten Daughter. The morning after the confrontation with Marcus Cole arrived cold and quiet. A layer of mist drifted across Ashwood Valley. From the porch of the old farmhouse, Isabella watched the sun slowly rise above the distant hills. The valley seemed peaceful, almost untouched by the conflict surrounding it. Birds moved through the trees. A gentle breeze stirred the tall grass. The lake reflected the colors of dawn like a giant moon. For a few moments, Isabella forgot about legal documents, hidden records, and family secrets. She simply admired the beauty of the place. Then she remembered something her grandfather had written. The true value of Ashwood Valley is not financial. At first, she hadn't fully understood those words. Now she was beginning to. Reading the journals. After breakfast, Isabella returned to the secret room. The journals lay spread across the desk. There were dozens of them. Years of memories, years of plans, years of dreams. She opened another volume and began reading. The entries painted a picture of a man very different from the wealthy businessman most people remember. Edward Harrington had never cared much about status. He rarely wrote about Instead, he wrote about people, teachers, farmers, children, families, neighbors. Again and again, the same theme appeared throughout the journals: opportunity. Edward believed that one opportunity could change an entire life. A scholarship, a job, a home, an education, a second chance. He viewed wealth as a tool for creating those opportunities, nothing more, nothing less. The more Isabella read, the more she admired him. The original dream. One journal contained detailed plans for Ashwood Valley. Hand-drawn sketches filled entire pages. Schools, libraries, parks, community centres, medical clinics, small business districts, housing developments designed for working families. Edward had spent years imagining how the valley could help future generations. His vision wasn't about profit, it was about impact. One entry stood out. If I leave behind wealth, it will eventually be spent. If I leave behind opportunity, it will continue growing long after I'm gone. Isabella read the sentence several times. It felt less like a business strategy and more like a life philosophy. A philosophy she found herself agreeing with. The forgotten story. As she continued reading, Isabella discovered something unexpected. A story about her mother. Years before Isabella was born, Grace Harrington had accompanied Edward during visits to struggling communities. Together they delivered supplies, supported local schools, helped families facing hardship. Edward often wrote proudly about his daughter. Grace understands something many wealthy people never learn. The purpose of success is not accumulation, it is contribution. Tears filled Isabella's eyes. She had always known her mother was kind, but she had never fully understood the depth of her character. Now she saw the connection. Grace's kindness hadn't appeared by accident. It had been inherited, passed from one generation to another, and perhaps now it was being passed to her. A visit to the town archive. Later that afternoon, Walter accompanied Isabella to the Willowbrook Ridge Historical Archive. The small building contained decades of local records, maps, photographs, newspapers, community documents. The archivist, an elderly woman named Helen Mercer, greeted Walter warmly. When she learned Isabella was Edward Harrington's granddaughter, her face brightened. "I remember him." Isabella smiled. "You do?" Helen nodded. "Everyone remembers him." The woman led them to a collection of old newspaper articles. One after another described Edward's community projects, scholarships, school improvements, infrastructure investments, support for struggling farms. The stories revealed a side of her grandfather rarely mentioned in public, a man who quietly improved lives without seeking recognition. By the time they left, Isabella felt proud, not of the inheritance, of the family she came from. News spreads. Meanwhile, word of the discovered ownership records spread quickly. Small towns have a way of sharing information. Within days, everyone seemed to know. The rightful heir had been found. The future of Ashwood Valley was uncertain, and Marcus Cole was not pleased. Several investors who had hoped to acquire portions of the valley suddenly lost interest. Without legal ownership, their plans were worthless. Marcus, however, refused to give up. He continued contacting lawyers, business partners, political connections, searching for another path. But every new legal review produced the same conclusion. The documents were legitimate. The valley belonged to Isabella, and that reality frustrated him more than anything else. An important question. One evening, Walter asked a question Isabella had been avoiding. They sat beside the farmhouse fireplace, reviewing documents. The flames crackled softly. Outside, rain tapped against the windows. Walter looked thoughtful. "What happens next?" Isabella frowned. "What do you mean?" "You own Ashwood Valley now." The statement felt strange, almost unreal. Walter continued. "You could sell it." She immediately shook her head. "No." "You could develop luxury housing." "No." "Commercial resorts?" "No." The old man smiled. "I thought so." Then his expression became serious. "What do you want?" The question lingered, because the truth was she hadn't fully decided. Until now, her focus had been uncovering the mystery, finding answers, proving ownership. But ownership was only the beginning. Now she needed a vision, a purpose, a plan. The letter she never expected. The answer arrived several days later, hidden inside the final journal, tucked between 2 pages, a sealed envelope, smaller than the others. Written across the front were 5 simple words. For my future heir, Isabella's hands trembled. Slowly she opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter from Edward Harrington. His final message. If you are reading this, then you succeeded where others failed. Isabella smiled slightly. The words sounded exactly like him. You have found the valley, you have uncovered the truth. Now comes the difficult part. Her attention sharpened. You must decide what kind of person you want to become. The letter continued. Many people believe wealth reveals character. In my experience, wealth simply magnifies what already exists. If a person is selfish, wealth makes them more selfish. If a person is generous, wealth makes them more generous. Isabella sat quietly, absorbing every word. Then she reached the final paragraph, and everything suddenly became clear. The forgotten truth. The greatest inheritance I can leave you is not this valley. It is the opportunity to choose what happens next. Use this land to create hope. Use it to create opportunity. Use it to create a future that benefits people long after you are gone. If you do that, then my dream will live on. Below the signature appeared one final sentence, the sentence that would stay with Isabella forever. The most valuable things in life cannot be inherited. They must be created. Tears filled her eyes, not from sadness, from understanding. At last, she understood the true purpose of Ashwood Valley. It was never meant to make someone rich. It was meant to make a difference. A new vision. That night, Isabella couldn't sleep. She sat on the farmhouse porch beneath a sky filled with stars. Thinking, planning, dreaming. By sunrise, her decision was made. She would honor her grandfather's vision. Schools, scholarships, community programs, affordable housing, business opportunities, everything he had imagined. Everything he had hoped future generations would build. The valley would become more than an inheritance. It would become a legacy. And for the first time in her life, Isabella felt completely certain about her future. Not because someone had told her who she should be, not because she was seeking approval, but because she had finally discovered her purpose. Trouble approaches. Unfortunately, purpose often attracts opposition. Several days later, Jonathan Reed, a local attorney helping Isabella review the ownership records, arrived with concerning news. His expression was serious, very serious. Marcus Cole has filed a legal challenge. Isabella's heart sank. A challenge? Jonathan nodded. He intends to contest the inheritance. Walter sighed heavily. The old battle wasn't over after all. In fact, it was only beginning, because Marcus had realized something dangerous. If Isabella succeeded, Ashwood Valley would become a symbol of everything he couldn't control, and he wasn't willing to accept it. The conflict was about to move beyond hidden rooms and secret rivals. The next battle would take place in public, and the outcome would determine not only Isabella's future, but the future of Ashwood Valley itself. End of Chapter 5. Chapter 6, A Daughter Remembered. As a major legal battle unfolds, Isabella's father finally confronts the mistakes of the past and begins to see the daughter he spent years overlooking. Chapter 6, A Daughter Remembered, The Forgotten Daughter. The legal challenge made headlines faster than Isabella expected. At first, only local newspapers covered the story. Then regional media picked it up. Soon, business publications began reporting on it as well. The story seemed almost unbelievable. A forgotten family inheritance. A hidden valley worth millions, a young woman uncovering a decades-old secret, and a powerful businessman attempting to challenge her claim. People were fascinated, but for Isabella, the attention felt uncomfortable. She had never wanted publicity. She had never wanted a public battle. She simply wanted to honor her family's legacy. Unfortunately, some journeys become larger than the people take them, and this was one of those journeys. As the news reaches Westbridge Heights, hundreds of miles away, Alexander Sterling sat in his office staring at the newspaper. The headline immediately caught his attention. Heiress uncovers hidden family inheritance. Beneath the headline was a photograph, his daughter's photograph. For several moments he simply stared, confused, surprised, then increasingly concerned. He read the article twice, then a third time. Only afterward did he realize something unsettling. He had no idea where Isabella was, no idea what she had been doing, no idea what challenges she had been facing. The realization struck harder than expected, because for the first time, he couldn't ignore the truth. He had become a stranger in his daughter's life. A difficult conversation. That evening, Alexander confronted Vanessa. "Did you know about this?" Vanessa remained calm. "About what?" "Isabella." The single word carried years of frustration. Vanessa folded her arms. "I knew she was traveling." "Where?" "I wasn't sure." Alexander stared at her. "You didn't think that was important?" Vanessa hesitated. For the first time, she seemed uncertain. The conversation ended quickly, but it left Alexander unsettled, because deep down, he understood something painful. The problem wasn't Vanessa. The problem wasn't Sophia. The problem was him. For years, he had convinced himself that providing financial security was enough, that working harder was a form of love, that success compensated for absence. Now he realized how wrong. Looking back, that night Alexander couldn't sleep. Instead, he wandered through the mansion. Room after room triggered memories. Family photographs, old furniture, forgotten moments. Eventually, he found himself standing outside Grace's old room. He hadn't entered it. Slowly, he pushed the door open. The room remained much as it had always been. Quiet, peaceful, filled with reminders of the woman he had loved. As he looked around, another realization surfaced. Grace had always noticed everything. Every achievement, every worry, every dream, especially Isabella's. And suddenly he wondered how many moments he had missed. The question haunted him. The forgotten memories. The next morning, Alexander opened several old family albums. At first, he intended only to pass the time. Instead, he found himself reliving years of memories. There was Isabella at 6 years old, proudly holding a painting. There she was winning a school award. There she was reading beside her mother, smiling, laughing, thriving. Then he noticed something else. As the years progressed, photographs became less frequent. Family outings disappeared. Shared moments became rare. His work had consumed more and more of his life, and Isabella had gradually faded into the background. Not because he stopped loving her, because he stopped paying attention. The distinction mattered little. The outcome was the same. The journey to Willowbrook Ridge. 3 days later, Alexander made an unexpected decision. He cancelled meetings, rescheduled appointments, delegated responsibilities. Then, he boarded a plane. Hours later, he arrived in Willowbrook Ridge. The town felt completely different from Westbridge Heights. No skyscrapers, no luxury hotels, no endless traffic, just quiet streets and friendly faces. For perhaps the first time in years, Alexander found himself outside the world of business. And strangely, it felt refreshing. The reunion, Isabella was reviewing documents inside the farmhouse when she heard a vehicle approach. Expecting Walter, she barely looked up. Then she heard a familiar voice. Isabella. She froze, slowly turning around. Her father stood in the doorway. For several seconds, neither moved, neither spoke. The silence felt enormous, filled with years of distance, years of disappointment, years of things left unsaid. Finally, Alexander stepped forward. "You've grown." The words sounded inadequate the moment they left his mouth. Isabella almost laughed. Of course she had grown. Years had passed, yet somehow that simple observation revealed how much he had missed. Honesty. The conversation that followed was difficult, painfully difficult. For the first time, father and daughter spoke honestly. No distractions, no business meetings, no social obligations, just truth. Alexander listened as Isabella described years of loneliness, forgotten birthdays, missed achievements, the feeling of being invisible. At times he struggled to hear it, not because he doubted her, because he knew she was right. Every story revealed another mistake, another missed opportunity, another moment that never recovered. When she finished, the room felt heavy. Then Alexander said something he should have said years earlier. "I'm sorry." The words were simple, but they were sincere, and sincerity matters. A father sees his daughter. Over the following days, Alexander remained in Willowbrook Ridge. Instead of returning immediately to his business empire, he spent time learning about Ashwood Valley, learning about Edward Harrington, learning about Grace, and most importantly, learning about Isabella. For perhaps the first time in her life, he paid attention. He listened to her ideas, asked questions, valued her opinions, observed her determination, her intelligence, her compassion, and gradually he began seeing what others already recognized. His daughter was extraordinary, not because of the inheritance, not because of the media attention, because of who she had become. Strong, thoughtful, purpose-driven, everything he should have noticed years ago. The court hearing. Several weeks later, the legal challenge finally reached court. The hearing attracted significant attention. Journalists filled the room. Community leaders attended. investors watched closely. Marcus Cole appeared confident, as always. His legal team argued aggressively. They questioned the trust, the inheritance, the ownership records. They suggested inconsistencies, raised doubts, created confusion wherever possible. Then Isabella's legal team presented the evidence. The original deeds, the trust documents, Edward Harrington's records, the journals, the letters. The evidence was overwhelming. One fact became impossible to deny. Ashwood Valley belonged to Isabella. Legally, clearly, unequivocally. Victory. The judge's decision arrived several days later. The challenge was dismissed. The inheritance remained valid. The trust would proceed exactly as Edward Harrington intended. The courtroom erupted with excitement. Supporters celebrated, journalists rushed to file reports. Marcus Cole left quietly, defeated. For Isabella, however, the victory felt different. The legal battle mattered, but it wasn't what made her happiest. What mattered most stood beside her. Her father, present, proud, engaged. For the first time in many years, a new beginning. That evening, father and daughter walked through Ashwood Valley together. The setting sun painted the landscape golden. Everything felt peaceful, hopeful, different. Alexander eventually stopped walking, then looked at Isabella. "You know something?" "What?" He smiled. "I spent years building companies." She listened quietly. "I thought success meant creating something valuable." He paused. "But you've shown me something more important." Isabella frowned slightly. "What?" Alexander smiled softly. "Success means helping others create their future." The words sounded remarkably similar to something Grace might have said, and perhaps that was fitting, because after all these years her influence still remained, guiding them, connecting them, helping them. Remembered later that night, Isabella stood alone beneath the stars, thinking, reflecting. For years she had been known as the forgotten daughter, the child nobody noticed, the girl living in someone else's shadow. But that chapter of her life was ending, not because she had inherited land, not because she had won a legal battle, because she had finally been seen, truly seen, by her father, by her community, and perhaps most importantly, by herself. Yet the greatest chapter of all still remained unwritten, because Ashwood Valley's future was only beginning, and Isabella was about to discover just how many lives one person's vision could change. End of Chapter 6. Chapter 7. A New Legacy. Isabella transforms Ashwood Valley into a thriving community, fulfills her grandfather's dream, and discovers the true meaning of her inheritance. Chapter 7. A New Legacy. The Forgotten Daughter. 1 year after the court victory, Ashwood Valley looked very different. The change had not happened overnight. It had required planning, patience, hard work, and countless difficult decisions. But slowly, steadily, Edward Harrington's dream was becoming reality. The abandoned farmhouse had been restored. New roads connected communities throughout the valley. Construction crews worked on schools and community centres. Small businesses were beginning to open. Families were moving into affordable homes. For the first time in decades, the valley was alive with possibility. And at the centre of it all stood Isabella Sterling. The girl who had once felt invisible. The girl who had spent years believing she didn't matter. Now she was helping build a future for thousands of people. Yet she never forgot where she came from. And she never forgot the lessons that brought her here. Building more than buildings. One morning, Isabella stood beside a construction site overlooking the valley. Workers moved equipment. Engineers reviewed plans. Teachers toured a nearly completed school. The project represented years of dreaming and planning. But Isabella understood something important. Buildings alone do not change lives. People do. The real goal wasn't constructing schools. It was creating opportunities. It wasn't building community centres. It was building hope. Everything happening in Ashwood Valley was designed around one simple idea. Give people a chance. A chance to learn. A chance to work. A chance to grow. A chance to succeed. The same opportunities her grandfather had envisioned decades earlier. The Harrington Scholarship Foundation. One of Isabella's first initiatives was creating the Harrington Scholarship Foundation. The program helped students from struggling families pursue higher education. Many recipients were the first members of their families to attend university. Some dreamed of becoming teachers. Others wanted to become doctors, engineers, artists, entrepreneurs. Every scholarship represented a new beginning. At the first award ceremony, Isabella addressed the students. She looked at the nervous faces seated before her, then smiled. I know what it feels like to believe nobody notices you. The room became quiet. I know what it feels like to wonder whether your dreams matter. Several students nodded, because they understood exactly what she meant. But never allow someone else's lack of attention to define your value. She paused. Your future belongs to you. The applause that followed felt genuine, because her words came from experience, not theory. A familiar visitor. Several months later, Isabella received an unexpected visitor, Sophia. For years, her stepsister had been the center of attention, the one everyone admired, the one everyone noticed. Yet now she stood quietly outside Isabella's office, looking nervous, which was unusual. Sophia entered slowly. I wanted to talk. Isabella smiled politely. Of course. Several moments passed before Sophia spoke again. I owe you an apology. The words surprised Isabella. Sophia looked down. I never realized what things were like for you. Her voice softened. I was so focused on myself that I didn't see. The honesty felt sincere. For the first time, they discussed the past openly. Misunderstandings, the distance, the family dynamics that had hurt them both. And by the end of the conversation, something unexpected happened. Healing began. Not perfectly, not instantly, but genuinely. Sometimes forgiveness doesn't erase the past. It simply allows people to move beyond it. How a community grows. Years passed. The valley continued transforming. The first school opened, then a library, then a health clinic. Business development programs helped local entrepreneurs launch companies. Agricultural initiatives supported farmers. Job training centers provided new opportunities. The effects spread far beyond the valley itself. Neighboring towns benefited. Regional economies improved. Families found stability. Students discovered possibilities they never imagined. Again and again, people asked Isabella the same question. How did you accomplish all of this? Her answer never changed. I didn't. People usually looked confused. Then she explained. A community built this because it was true. Teachers, volunteers, business owners, parents, students, everyone contributed. The dream belonged to all of them. The return to the farmhouse. One autumn evening, Isabella returned to the farmhouse alone. The house had been carefully restored. Yet many original details remained unchanged. Her grandfather's desk still stood beside the window. The journals remained safely preserved. The hidden room still existed. Everything felt familiar, comforting. She walked through each room slowly, remembering, reflecting, thinking about how much had changed. Then she entered the secret room, the room where she had first discovered the truth, the room where her life began changing. There, hanging on the wall, was a new photograph, a panoramic image of Ashwood Valley, schools, homes, parks, families, communities, a living legacy. And beneath the photograph was a plaque containing one of Edward Harrington's favorite quotes. Opportunity is the greatest gift one person can give another. Isabella smiled, because now she understood exactly what he meant. A father's pride. Alexander Sterling visited the valley often, far more often than anyone expected, including Isabella. Over time, their relationship grew stronger. Not perfect. No relationship is, but stronger. Built on honesty, respect, and effort. One afternoon, while attending the opening of a new community center, Alexander watched his daughter address a crowd. Hundreds of people listened attentively. Children, teachers, families, local leaders. Everyone respected her. Not because of wealth, not because of status, because she had earned their trust. When the event ended, Alexander approached her. You know, he said. What? He smiled. Your mother would be incredibly proud. For a moment, Isabella couldn't speak. Those words meant more than any award ever could. The greatest lesson. Several years later, a young reporter interviewed Isabella. By then, her story had become well known. People admired what she accomplished. The reporter asked many questions about leadership, success, legacy, community development. Then came the final question, the simplest question, yet perhaps the most important. What was the greatest lesson you learned? Isabella thought carefully, then smiled. For a long time, I believed my story was about being forgotten. The reporter listened, but it wasn't. What was it about? Isabella looked across the valley. Children played near the school. Families walked through the park. Teachers left the library. Life flourished everywhere. Then she answered. It was about discovering that your value doesn't depend on who notices you. the reporter wrote quickly. Isabella continued. Sometimes the world overlooks people. Sometimes even the people closest to us fail to see who we are. She smiled softly. But that doesn't change our worth. The answer would later appear in newspapers across the country because it resonated with so many people. The legacy lives on. 20 years after Isabella first arrived in Willowbrook Ridge, Ashwood Valley had become a model community. Students educated there became teachers, doctors, scientists, and leaders. Businesses created jobs, families built better futures. Generations benefited from opportunities that once existed only in Edward Harrington's journals. The dream had survived. Not because one person made it happen, because one person chose not to give up. And that made all the difference. The forgotten beauty. No more one evening, as the sun set over Ashwood Valley, Isabella stood on a hill overlooking everything she had built and created. Golden light stretched across the landscape. Children laughed in the distance. Families gathered in parks. The valley glowed with life. For a moment, she remembered the lonely girl she once was. The girl sitting quietly at family dinners. The girl whose birthdays were forgotten. The girl who felt invisible. She wished she could speak to that younger version of herself. And if she could, she would say only one thing. Don't let other people's blindness convince you that you are invisible. Because the truth was simple. She had always mattered. She had always been enough. She simply needed time to discover it. And now, standing beneath a sky painted with colour, she finally understood. Being forgotten had never been the end of her story. It had been the beginning. Moral of the story. Your worth is not determined by how much attention you receive. Sometimes the people who feel unseen become the ones who create the greatest impact. Never allow neglect, rejection, or loneliness to define your future. Because the world may overlook your potential, but that does not mean it isn't there. And sometimes the forgotten daughter becomes the person everyone remembers. The end.